A very good morning to you, and many thanks indeed for joining us on the AM Live. As you can see, they're holding court this morning. Our guests already in the studio. We have with us Dorcas Ojor, Deputy Director of Public Prosecutions. Also, we have Aggrey Willis Otieno. He's a Program Coordinator of African Network for the Prevention and Protection Against Child Abuse and Neglect. And also we have Lisa Madigan, all the way from USA. She's the Attorney General Illinois State. Also, we shall be, I didn't get your name this morning, you just arrived this morning. Is this Ruth? Yes. Yes, Ruth from the chairperson. Fantastic. All right, we shall be hearing from our guest this morning. It's all about the human trafficking that is ongoing on in the world. Of course, it's a transnational threat, and we'll be dealing with that much later in the course of the program. But for now, of course, we had beautiful songs there, Fading Away from Forever Country, or segment in the morning where we make sure we give you a good cheering start early in the morning with good country music. And tomorrow is Easter, right? We have Easter Friday tomorrow. Today they call it the Maundy Thursday, and we commemorate, the death of Jesus Christ on the cross. Of course, we know that he came from heaven. He took a simple personage of humanity, dwelt amongst us, and he was crucified because of our sins. So we had beautiful songs there. Tell Me More About Jesus there by Vince Gill, and also I'm the Way with that particular song that we just had last, Make a Way. So that's set the tone for conversation this morning. We are going to enjoy with our guest. But before we go there, let's see what is on the front pages of the dailies today. And this is what is on the front page of the Daily Nation today. Raila Party under fire in NASA cracks. This is what we have on the front page of the Daily. ODM disowned Tuesday statement by its own Secretary General on lineup. This is what the Daily Nation is saying. And you can see also the principals holding court there. Mudavadi and Kalonzo demand apology for ODM over reports saying Alliance has settled on Odinga as a man to run against President Uhuru Kenyatta. That story on page 4 of the Daily Nation today. Let's move on and we see what we have also on the front page of the Standard. And this is your splash today. Will they survive? That's a probing question. Nomination guillotine, party primaries start, and in Jubilee and opposition strongholds, there will be only one ticket that places the winner in the main race. Some 116 days away, in select counties, dust will rise as giants lock horns, and you can see their faces also spread on the front page of the Standard this morning. 13 battleground counties for governor seats. Nairobi, you have Busia as well, and also going down you have Nyamira County and Nakuru County as well. All that in the Standard today. I didn't get my soft copy of the Star, but I will show you what we have on the People Daily this morning. Hot battles loom in ODM nominations. Ojamong versus Otuoma, Ranguma versus Nyong'o are just 2 pointers to the blazing contest in the offing as the Orange Party kicks off primaries. That story on page 6 of the People Daily today. You can see their faces as well. And we move on and we see what we have also on the front page of the Business Daily this morning. And this is what we have. Ex-Chase Bank bosses sued for 14 billion shillings theft. That is what we have here. Lenders say former executives use private companies to siphon funds. That story continues on page 4 of the Business Daily, where it's tucked away. Also, home prices rise tenfold in 15 years is another story that you want to follow inside the Business Daily as well. Right, let's see what we have on the front page of Taifa Leo, our Swahili paper. NASA mbioni kujinasua. That is what we have as a splash today. Mudavadi and Kalonzo wakutana kufuatia majibizano kuhusu mgombeaji urais. That is a story that continues also on page 2 of Taifa Leo. Munya Mbele, Ruto na Laboso wakabana ko. That is a story also you need to follow on page 2 of Taifa Leo. Let's cross over to Uganda and we see what we have on the front page of the Daily Monitor. This is our sister paper in Uganda. I want big fish, not small fry. IGG tells Katurebe. This is all about corruption, right? The flag reads corruption judiciary there. And that story is tucked on page 4 and 5 of the Daily Monitor in Uganda. Also, we have Tanzania carrying this particular headline today with the Citizen. JPM to MPs, let me deliver on mandate. This is what John Pombe Magufuli is telling the members of parliament in Tanzania. You can grab a copy of the Citizen for that particular story. Still in Tanzania, Mwananchi is up next. Jinsi treni ya kisasa itakavyoleta miujiza. This is all about also SGR. I don't know if it's happening in Tanzania. You can follow that story in Mwananchi as well. We cross over to Rwanda. I don't know if I've actually loaded that particular daily, but I can do that very quickly so that you can actually get to see also what we have in the New Times this morning. But I don't seem to be having it here. Let me try and see if I can get it for you. Just give me a moment and try and go there, because I know I have it somewhere. There we go. This is what we have in the New Times in Rwanda. Genocide memorials, I should say, a key tool in fighting denial. This is according to the Prime Minister. And you can follow this story inside the New Times on page 2 today. Visiting genocide, it says, memorial sites and getting first-hand information on what happened in Rwanda can play a significant role in fighting genocide ideology and denial and ensuring that what happened never happens again in the future. Prime Minister Anastase Murekezi has said that story, as I mentioned, you have it on page 2 of the New Times in Rwanda today. And this week we have the East African carrying this particular, or has been carrying this particular story. Uganda differs with Kenya on Rift Valley Railway future concession. Kampala wants Kala Holdings owned operator to be given time to explore options like borrowing and new partners despite its troubled past. You have a full report of this on page 4 of East African. Also, fall armyworms, East Africa faces more disaster in light of what we're going on with also the drought. This also is troubling, but you can follow all this particular story by Alan Olingo on page 28, where you have a full report in the East African this week. Let me show you what we have also internationally. This is what we have on the front page of the New York Times today. And we can see here, leaving Mosul and childhood behind, Iraqi children who fled fighting in Mosul were reunited with relatives on Tuesday. ISIS killed their father in an earlier escape attempt. And of course, this is all about the existential threat of terrorism and fighting that is going on in Syria with ISIS as well. Dragging of passengers set off a crisis at United. And I mentioned to you, we have also the Attorney General of Illinois from Chicago there. She will be weighing in on this particular story much later in the course of the program as well. Missteps in airlines response draw denunciation. And of course, there was a bit of a gaffe from the CEO himself. But we'll give you all the gritty details of this and how this also has spooked their shares in the stock market as well. And also, this is a national edition of the New York Times, but the international edition is carrying this. Will London fall? I think this should be, yes, this is the international edition. Will London fall? It's a probing question there. And we can see a picture here with a caption reading, the start of a workday in London last month. Modern London thrives on the idea that one city can be a place where everyone tolerates everyone else, mostly. And a sad story as well. Don't forget the Syrian refugees is a crisis as well. And we've seen also those children who are bearing the brunt of this war. Sleeping is a new status symbol, or status symbol. You can follow this story also inside the New York Times. Once we will boast of not needing very much, now slumber is coveted, and that is a story you can follow in the New York Times as well. I want to show you the editorial cartoons that we have today in the dailies. In the Daily Nation, Munene has drawn this for you. It is all about the nominations and how it will be. You can see there, it's a bulldozer carrying some of the aspirants who will be thrown in that particular churning machine, which is a nomination. So how will it be? Remember, also we'll be giving you live wall-to-wall coverage of these happenings in Busia and elsewhere where the nominations will be carried out today. We have also in the Star, and this is what Victor has drawn for you, right? Who will light this particular bulb? Is it, you know, the head of Mudavadi or Kalonzo? And of course, we can see the principal of CORD is actually on a horn of dilemma on choosing who should be the flag bearer in NASA. That is according to Stano. We have also Gado in the Standard, and he has drawn this for you today. It's all about NASA as well. And he says, don't get too excited. You're merely a pace setter. All right. I think we're missing an R there. Also, I'm the founding father of NASA. I should lead the way. And you can see also one of the flag bearers as well is carrying that particular suitcase that is embroiled with all corruption cases of Tokyo, Tripoli, London. You know this particular story, and some of them also are chained there. And there's a runaway chameleon there, well, as is always personified as a chameleon, one of the presidential flag bearer. And this is what Stano has drawn in the People Daily today. It's all about NASA as well. So I'll leave it for you to decipher this. Those are your editorial cartoons as well. And the New Times. The New Times is carrying this particular story, right? The front page of the New Times is all about ISIS and Syria. If I may pick it up. There you go. The uranium underworld. ISIS, it says, wants a dirty bomb and it knows where to get one. That is a copy of the recent New Times. You can grab a copy of that as well for those riveting, compelling stories about transnational threat of global terrorism. And this morning also, we're discussing the human trafficking. And the International Labour Organization estimates that there are 20.9 million victims of human trafficking globally, of which 68% of them are trapped in forced labor. Some 26% of them are children, while 55% are women and girls. Well, it is against this background that the Conference of Western Attorneys General, CWAG, in conjunction with the Office of the Attorney General of Kenya, held a one-day seminar on the theme Human Trafficking, Prosecution and Other International Organized Crimes in Nairobi. The conference comes as Kenya scales up its war against human trafficking and international organized crimes world over. Transnational crimes such as drug trafficking, human trafficking, terrorism, smuggling and wildlife trafficking have been on the rise. Here in Africa, the reason have mainly been for forced labor, sex exploitation and terrorism. Victims are usually from countries going through civil strife, mostly from poor backgrounds. Kenya, however, has remained a sought-after human trafficking transition point and destination due to its stability and infrastructure development. Therefore, while Kenya have moved from watch list tier 2 to tier 2 or tier 1 to tier 2, Kenya has been described variously. And it has been described. I think I've lost my point there on the autocue. But this is what we shall be describing and talking about. Kenya has been described as a country of origin, transit and destination in human trafficking by various reports, and more recently by the National Crime Research Center. And that will set the tone for our conversation this morning. But before we go there, we want to see what we have in the highlights for you this morning. ODM nominations, of course, it is a neck-and-neck battle for some of the aspirants. And criminal justice will give you all the gritty details about human trafficking. And South African politics, where protesters, they are gagging for resignation of Zuma. Wiper leader Kalonzo Musyoka wants ODM Secretary General Agnes Zani to withdraw her remarks, owning up to a leaked document from the NASA steering committee that showed ODM leader Raila Odinga as a flag bearer. However, the Alliance's coordinating committee has moved to rein in constituents' parties, warning officials against making remarks on the flag bearer question. They say the commentary is sabotaging ongoing talks on a presidential candidate. Kalonzo Musyoka also held a brief meeting with ANC leader Musalia Mudavadi at Wiper Party headquarters, with the duo later playing it safe when asked about the import of it. The principals are expected to receive the final report from the steering committee early next week before they proceed for a retreat at the end of that week.
Ikiwa ni kweli katibu mkuu wa ODM alizungumza yale aliyazungumza, basi hana budi ila withdraw publicly, kwa sababu we have not agreed. Nothing is agreed until it is agreed.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. What Nyenze said, party leader came out to say that is Nyenze's democratic right to say what he said. We are also putting it now. That was Zani's democratic right to say what she said.
If there's anybody talking on behalf of the National Super Alliance who does not belong to any of the organs of the National Super Alliance, I think that kind of information should be taken for what it is worth, because it is not official communication from within the National Super Alliance.
We do not have a flag bearer as of now. Oh, yeah. But this will not persist for another month, I can assure you.
The NASA supporters and Kenyans will see one of us delivering the papers to the IEBC to confirm that there is a presidential candidate.
Political parties have agreed to comply with the electoral laws before they embark on party primaries set to begin today. So far, 25 political parties have signed and returned the electoral code of conduct that will guide their operations and conduct in the period before and during the general election, I should say. In a half-day meeting with stakeholders, IBC also gave a progress report on an independent audit on the voter registration or the voter register undertaken by KPMG. The electoral code of conduct that was initially meant to be signed at the event having to be done after consultation with party executive committee was given a wide berth. Many were skeptical about committing to a document they have doubts about. The electoral code of conduct touches on the matters of using state machinery in the campaigns, an issue that political parties have raised concerns about. The IBC has put in place an election technology advisory committee that will undertake the process to ensure a clean register devoid of problems such as dead voters.
And what you are pledging yourselves to.
For those who are not comfortable with the draft which our legal team has put out together, go and extract what is the second schedule, sign it and bring it to us tomorrow.
If somebody visits violence on, say, female contestants, for example, and if we disqualify that person, the IBC should not open for them a window to become independent candidates.
I append my signature to every other mistake that any member can make. It will be squarely on me.
Out party primaries. Afterwards, hold on. Afterwards, we expect you to carry out dispute resolution mechanism. After that, 90 days to elections, you are supposed now to forward your candidates. And I think the law is very clear.
Governors say they will go to court if Parliament passes an amendment to the election law to allow for only one appeal in an election petition. The governors say the bill is unconstitutional as it goes against Article 48 of the Constitution on access to justice and Article 50 on fair hearing. The bill, which is on its second reading, includes these proposals by the Chief Justice, which he says are meant to expedite the hearing of election petitions and, if passed, will see the Supreme Court only handle presidential petitions.
This is a contravention of Article 48 on access to justice and Article 50 on fair hearing. And it is not in the best public interest to limit the rights of citizens who feel aggrieved by an election to get a second opinion and a third opinion to the highest court in the land. I want to inform him that it is not possible to amend the Constitution through an ordinary legislation. If I were to refer you to my own petition, which was the first one to break this ground, we went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court was able to pronounce it itself on the constitutionality of appeals from the Court of Appeal on petitions.
Now, the fate of Mombasa Governor Ali Hassan Joho now lies with the IBC. This after the High Court declined to issue temporary orders stopping the IBC from accepting his clearance certificates for his direct nomination to defend his seat. Justice Chacha Mwita directed the petitioner Abdallah Juma to serve his petition to respondents and appear in court for further direction on the 3rd of May this year. In the case filed yesterday at the Milimani Law Court, Juma is seeking to block the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission from clearing Mombasa Governor Hassan Joho from defending his seat. He claims that Joho's university degree was obtained fraudulently and therefore does not qualify to hold or vie for the office of a governor. Abdallah Juma argues in his urgent application that Joho's academic credentials do not meet the threshold set by the Constitution for a gubernatorial aspirant. In his petition, Juma states that candidates with a D- grade in KCSE cannot qualify for admission into any university in Kenya or East Africa, and neither can such a candidate do a bridging course and ultimately join a university in Kenya or East Africa. Now, the Kenya justice system could be helping criminals get away. Attorney General Professor Getho Muigai says Kenya is among the few countries in the world that grant suspects of nearly all crimes bail. These suspects also have a right to the evidence to be used against them, including the list of the witnesses and their statements. This has led to witnesses tampering and the cases being withdrawn. The Attorney General and leaders of the justice sector during a seminar on human trafficking and other international crimes said this, and Andrew Cheng has more.
The increasing profitability in the illegal trafficking of human beings has seen its rise globally, especially with the wars, dictatorships and hard economic times in many countries. Kenya is among the countries that serve as transit points for many immigrants being trafficked to South Africa or to Europe and America. While some are easier to manage, others who live in secluded communities are much more difficult to find out.
Some of the societies like the Indians, the Chinese, are closed up society. People can come and be trafficked and they stay in their houses without doing anything. There are also girls who come from India, Nepal, and they only dance in the night. So you have to become some nocturnal activity to get to know who they are.
Yet often, those being trafficked are the victims, and the Attorney General wants law enforcement officers to be more humane when dealing with them.
We've had a default mechanism where the system treats the victim as a criminal, and where the system does not concentrate on the trafficker as the criminal. That's what we want to fix by working together.
We actually don't jail them so that they actually don't end up the double jeopardy, that they have been trafficked, having lost their money, and then they end up in jail. We, as a department, I think my accounting officer, in a month, we use close to about 4 to 5 million to actually deport these people, or rather repatriate, and particularly these are the Ethiopians and the Eritreans, and of course the Somalis.
Arresting the kingpins, however, is difficult. There is the complex nature of international crimes, but even when arrested, the justice system may be at fault, appearing to favor the suspect instead of the victim because he is entitled to bail and access to all the evidence against him.
Police begin by giving the evidence they will use in the prosecution of a suspect to the suspect. Then the suspect is entitled to bail. The minute he is bailed, he takes his evidence and begins to hunt down the people who want to testify against him. And then we have a fiasco, a terrible fiasco.
The person on trial is not the victim. The person on trial is the accused person, and they have as many rights as the victims have. The balancing act is on a case-to-case basis, and if grounds are given that this person is not entitled to bail, we then do not grant bail.
Kenya also finds itself a victim because of its citizens who are mistreated abroad. The government says it has now put in place more strict measures for agencies that send Kenyans to work abroad, especially in the Middle East. The agencies are under more scrutiny now and have been mandated to ensure the Kenyans they send and be responsible for bringing them back should there be need. Even though human trafficking is a global problem, some of the issues that make people vulnerable to it remain beyond their control. These include wars and economic crisis all over the world. Andrew Ochieng, NTV.
That story by Andrew Cheng acts as a segue to our conversation here in the morning. We are discussing all about human trafficking and how also it is an existential global transnational threat, where also we can see traffickers of terrorism acts also. They're using this particular conduit to perpetrate their evil. And if you had actually woken up with us and watched the show from the beginning, I'd introduce you a guest, but I will do that again for you so that you can get to know who we are talking about this morning. And this is in light of that conference that is ongoing on as well, which was happening yesterday. They will tell us more about it this morning. And we have with us Lisa Madigan, who is the Attorney General from Illinois State in the United States of America. Ruth Juliet Gashanja, she's an advocate, advisory committee on counter-trafficking in person. She's an advocate of the High Court. She's the chairperson of the advisory committee on counter-trafficking in person. Also, we have Florence Mwangangi, an advocate of the High Court, and also member of the Judicial Service Commission. We have as well Jacinta Nyamosi, the senior assistant from the Director of Public Prosecutions. And we have with us, where I placed his, let me try and see, just have it with me here, I'm just a bit confused. Aggrey Willis Otieno is a program coordinator of the African Network for the Prevention and Protection Against Child Abuse and Neglect. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning.
Right, let's just begin with this particular conference that we had yesterday, the highlight of it and why you saw it deemed or fit to be actually held yesterday. And what were the highlights of that particular conference as well? Let's just begin with you, Jacinta.
Thank you very much. For me, the fact that we got all the stakeholders, especially in the Kenyan context, brings out the fact that there is a multi-sectoral approach in the fight against human trafficking. Mm-hmm. It was also very important when we heard from the US, mm-hmm. We got to see that they also have their own challenges, yes. their problems, which problems we are also encountering as a country. Mm-hmm. And we felt that we can, we got to learn a lot from them, and I guess they also learned a lot from us. Yes. Definitely the fact that the stakeholders have come together in such kind of a forum means that there is that will to fight human trafficking. All right. From my intro also I mentioned about Kenya, scaling down from the first tier to the second tier. What diametrically or what difference does it make? Is there any discernible difference about this particular tiers? If maybe you can enlighten us on this as well.
Actually, we were in tier 2.
Tier 2.
At some point we were tier 2 watch list, then we got promoted. So we've never been to tier 1.
So it's, you've never been to tier 1?
Yes.
How so? So it is, because I read I got a bit confused, tier 2, tier 2.
Yeah, there is tier 1, which is the best, then tier 2, then there is tier 2 watch list, then there is the tier 3.
All right, so what is the difference for the benefit of our viewers?
What happens is that in all these tiers, the US State Department, they usually have a report on human trafficking every year. And what they do is to rank countries based on those tiers, tier 1 being the best, tier 3 being the worst in terms of meeting minimum standards mm-hmm. in addressing human trafficking issues. Mm-hmm. So Kenya for some time have been on tier 2 watch list, but in the year 2015 we got promoted to tier 2.
Mm-hmm. All right, 20.9 million victims of human trafficking globally, as estimated by the International Labour Organization. Is this number staggering to you, Lisa?
It is, and I think most people don't realize the pervasiveness of human trafficking. It's happening in every single country in the world, and many people who are like us and are well aware of what's taking place, both the sex trafficking and the labor trafficking, recognize that in many ways and for far too many people, this really is modern day slavery. And it is something that we have to work hard to eradicate. It is just unacceptable that in this day and age we are allowing young girls, young boys, adult women and adult men to essentially be controlled, to have themselves commodified. Somebody is making money off of them and they are not able to, fulfill their God-given potential. And so it really was wonderful to have the opportunity for me to come to Kenya and to meet with everybody in every sector who's working on this problem and to hear, as Jacinta said, very similar concerns, very similar challenges that we face in the United States as it's being faced here in Kenya.
Mm-hmm. But when we talk about, especially from the United States, and we have these very stringent rules that we have with the current administration, executive orders on also immigration as well. In what way do you think this also exacerbates the situation? Because now the doors are not open. There's stringent rules on how to get to the American or other areas of, when you're talking about European immigration as well.
So what I can tell you is that in the United States, what is happening, unfortunately, because of many of the changes that have taken place with the new administration, is that for individuals who either are undocumented immigrants in our country, they are very fearful right now of coming forward to law enforcement, to the government. They always were, but it has gotten even worse. And so for those individuals who are most vulnerable to these types of trafficking, it is going to be even less likely that we find out that there is a problem. Mm-hmm. And as I said, it's a very underreported or unreported crime as it is. So we struggle in terms of law enforcement response to find out that this is taking place, to prosecute, to have witnesses who cooperate, because they are very leery of working with the government, working with law enforcement. So the changes that have taken place from the federal administration have made that even more difficult in the United States.
Right. Ruth, she talks about, yes, very limited or documented cases because maybe they're not reported or they're underreported. Is this a case also of, you know, the voices being muffled, or maybe also the media is not really fixated on what is really happening with the with this human trafficking? Because we see other media outlets, they are holding campaigns as well to try and stem out the issue as well. But why is there underreporting when it comes to human trafficking?
Well, I think underreporting is basically because of two things. One is people do not understand what human trafficking is. I mean, I think if you were to take a poll just here and ask people, what is human trafficking? People will not be able to really explain what it is. So number one, that is the first problem, is that understanding what really human trafficking actually is. The other thing is also our law enforcement agencies not being able to really understand what human trafficking is. In Kenya, we have a law, Counter-Trafficking in Persons Act, and I think very few people actually know that it exists. And so therefore you find people when they report, they say, you know, there is this case of either child labor, or they'll report it as forced labor, for instance, or child labor when it comes to children. And so therefore they'll not be able to really capture the essence of human trafficking. Also the media, I mean, they're doing a great job. Just recently I've been reading a few reports here and there, and I think they've been doing a good job in terms of reporting. But as you're saying, you have other media houses that are having campaigns against human trafficking. And in Kenya, we haven't seen that yet. So I think that is one of the issues that we're actually looking at in terms of reporting. Yeah.
So do we have, maybe we should have begun by defining what human trafficking is all about, because we're just writing on assumption everyone understands. Maybe when we combine that particular traffic and human, people think about, you know, people en masse walking, you know, to a particular conference or in the street. Let's come to you, Florence, to break it down for us. Human trafficking, what is it all about, and why do we think that human trafficking is not really such a sexy story to tell?
Can I just start by correcting that I'm not a sitting member of the JSC. I am immediate former member.
Immediate former member.
Yes.
Okay, it seems I was given wrong information. My apologies.
Okay, so now the definition of human trafficking is given not only in the Kenyan laws, but also on the international level. We have the UNTOC. This is the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime and related protocols, so that you find that human trafficking is where you're changing the human being into a merchandise. And the underlying factor is making money, making not just profit, but money out of selling the humans. And most of the time you find that the person who is being trafficked may not be knowing that they're being trafficked, or they may know and they're willing. And you find that they're being driven by a fact of a promise of a better life, because they have been living in poverty and they want to live in a better life in that other destination that they're being taken to. But then later, as it turns out to be, they turn out to be merchandise and used in various ways, some of which of course include prostitution and forced labor in the farms, in the homes, and this cuts across all gender. It can be female, it can be male. It also cuts across all age. It can be young children, it can be adults, and relatively older people, because they all have some way to serve in whatever destination they are being taken to.
All right, if we may come back to you, Jacinta, just give us a picture of the conference. It was a one-day conference, right? Do you think also you could have thrashed out all the matters about human trafficking within one day? It must have been a very intense day. Did you begin at 8 o'clock?
Fairly, let's say we started about 9 o'clock.
9 o'clock.
My take is that we needed more time.
You needed more time.
We needed more time, basically because human trafficking has actually not really been understood. And we needed to know what role each and every actor needs to play. So I don't think we were able to tackle everything. We needed people to understand what kind of human trafficking, for instance, is in Kenya. People have always thought human trafficking is just on international level. People also needed to know that there is domestic human trafficking, and it might even be larger. A situation where you find you get a house girl, for instance, coming from up country, and she believes that she's been removed from her home to another place so that she can be educated. And then when she's brought back, let's say, to an urban center like Nairobi, she's instead of her, going ahead to go for an education, she's now used as a house girl. Okay, that is not the intention. That's not what you wanted to come through. So people also need to be educated that human trafficking doesn't really have to be cross borders. It is within our own, you know,
So it
our
could be
own
the domestic human
yes.
trafficking, so to
So
speak.
there's so much on human trafficking, the intricacies, and it is really unfortunate that most of the people don't even know that they are trafficking themselves. They actually don't know. You find that you think it's just normal. So, and we also needed to bring in so many other actors. We also needed to bring in on board the people like chiefs who actually come across these victims on the first instance. So for me, I think if we can be able to get a situation where we get more days, articulate and, you know, make a situation where it's all public, the media must also come out. And also, I believe the media also will need some education out of it. So that when it comes out, we'll be teaching not only ourselves as the actors or the bearers of offices in government institutions, but we are out there to teach the public.
Thank you. Let's come to Lisa. We'll, of course, continue this conversation. But I want just to know, what is the sort of a ticklish situation or a case you've really had in office in, of course, Illinois, when it comes to human trafficking? You felt this was a complicated case.
Well, I'm going to give you an example of labor trafficking, because oftentimes, and even yesterday, when we talk about human trafficking, almost everybody's in agreement that sex trafficking is a crime. But there's a lot of conversation, and I think a lot of different views when it comes to labor trafficking, where people think, look, maybe the example that Jacinta just gave, it's not necessarily trafficking. It's more of a situation where somebody from a rural community who is, you know, doesn't have a lot of opportunity comes to an urban area and she gets a job. And in that circumstance, well, then that's fine. That's not a violation of the law. But in fact, it can be. And certainly in the United States, we have many circumstances where we have laws in place about minimum wages, overtime pay, how old you can be in terms of working, similar laws to what you have here. But we see those being violated by the employer to an extent that it can also result in forced labor. When there's a circumstance that the employer is charging somebody, in essence, for getting the job, they're taking them to and from the job so that they don't actually have any freedom of movement. They're housing them in substandard conditions. They're physically abusing them. They are yelling at them and mistreating them. And so in those circumstances, we have done a lot, and we've actually brought a case against an employment agency where they were taking undocumented workers from some of the Central American countries and placing them in Chinese buffet restaurants and ending up in a situation that I just described. They'd be working 11 to 13 hours a day for as little as $3.50 an hour, which in the United States is far below our minimum wage, which in Illinois is $8.25 an hour. Not getting overtime pay, not allowed to, you know, live where they wanted to live. So very, very poor conditions that we have gone after.
Thank you, thank you. And of course, we will be drilling deeper with this on the other side of a break. But before we also take a break, we need to see what is happening internationally. Of course, we can also follow stories where we have the human trafficking as well, which is up next. reaction?
Well, my reaction is the same as everybody else's, right? For the CEO to say it's upsetting, it's not upsetting, it's outrageous what happened to that individual. And to me, it shows the fact that for far too many years, there has been no oversight, no consumer protection when it comes to how the airlines treat their passengers, right? They've shrunk our seats, we have to pay if we want to check a bag, it costs if you even want to pick a seat, and they constantly overbook flights so that you end up in this situation, and it was handled absolutely terribly. I'd be very surprised if this CEO actually survives this crisis. This is a devastating situation, and it can't be tolerated.
Thank you very much. Right, we'll take a short break on that note. On the other side of the break, of course, we drill deeper on the human trafficking issue in the world, and we'll be discussing this with our panelists already. We've set the tone for that. So also joining us will be the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Labour to tell us more on what also they're doing to try and alleviate this situation in the country. Don't go away, much more coming up on the other side of the break. The weather is up next. owning up to a leaked document from the NASA steering committee that showed ODM leader Raila Odinga as the flag bearer. However, the Alliance's coordinating committee has moved to rein in constituent parties, warning officials against making remarks on the flag bearer question. Political parties have agreed to comply with the electoral laws before they embark on party primaries set to begin today. So far, 25 political parties have signed and returned the electoral code of conduct that will guide their operations and conduct in the period before and during the general election. The Kenyan justice system could be helping criminals get away. Attorney General Professor Githu Muigai says Kenya is among the few countries in the world that grant suspects of nearly all crimes bail. These suspects also have a right to the evidence to be used against them, including the list of the witnesses and the justice system. Several thousand people marched in South Africa's capital to protest against President Jacob Zuma following a much-criticized cabinet reshuffle days after the opposition called countrywide marches to demand his resignation. The protesters marched through the city's streets and rallied at a field outside the union buildings. The International Labour Organization estimates that there are 20.9 million victims of human trafficking globally. And of this, 68% of them are trapped in forced labor. Some 26% of them are children, while 55% are women and girls. Well, it is against this particular background, the Conference of Western Attorneys General, in conjunction with the Office of the Attorney General of Kenya, held a one-day seminar on the theme, quote-unquote, human trafficking, prosecution, and other international organized crimes in Nairobi. The conference comes as Kenya scales up its war against human trafficking and international organized crimes world over. We understand transnational crimes such as drug trafficking, human trafficking, terrorism, smuggling, and wildlife trafficking have been on the rise. Here in Africa, the reasons have mainly been for forced labor, sex exploitation, and terrorism. Victims are usually from countries going through civil strife, mostly from poor backgrounds. Kenya, however, has remained a sought-after human trafficking transition point and destination due to its stability and infrastructure development. Therefore, while Kenya has moved from watch list Tier 2 to Tier 2, Kenya has been described as a country of origin, transit, and destination in human trafficking by various reports, and more recently by the National Crime Research Center. And of course, we are holding court with our guests this morning who are already here in the studio to talk to us on this particular development and the conference that happened yesterday. And I have with me this morning Susan Mochache, who she's joining us. She's a Permanent Secretary, State Department of Social Protection, the Ministry of Labor. Also, we do have with us Lisa Madigan, who's the Attorney General from Illinois State. Also, we have Jacinta Nyamosi, Senior Assistant DPP she's sitting in for Dorcas Odro this morning. We have with us also Ruth Juliet Gashanja. She's an Advocate Advisory Committee on Counter Trafficking in person. She's the chairperson there. And also we have with us Aggrey. Aggrey is the program officer or program coordinator. This is the African Network for the Prevention and Protection Against Child Abuse and Neglect. We continue this conversation. Also, remember you can chime in. It is on Twitter. AM Live and TV is a Twitter handle. AM Live and TV is a profile name on Facebook. Give us a thumbs up there. And also 20505 is our SMS portal. Right, before we took a short break, we had that particular story of Gambia and how also the European or the Europe migrants, they're really suffering. And of course, also the smugglers are taking advantage of this and exacerbating the issue as well. So in light of what is happening, especially in the world, now with the transnational threat of terrorism, how also are traffickers taking advantage of this? I think we want to talk to you, Ruth. Briefly, very briefly.
Yeah, I just want to say that this is a classic case of how smuggling, which actually is an offense. So
Yes.
there's a lot of confusion as to what is human trafficking and what is smuggling and what is the main difference.
Yes.
And smuggling is actually an offense against the state, and human trafficking is an offense against the person. So this is a classic example of how, you know, it started off as smuggling, whereas people are trying to leave their homes looking for better, you know, greener pastures, and they're going to other countries. But in the process of traveling and going and looking for greener pastures, they actually become trafficked. Because now, as opposed to where a smuggler's relationship with the victim, I would say, ends at the point of, you've crossed the border and our relationship is done with you. What happens is that in trafficking, the relationship continues. And so the smugglers, the people who are being smuggled are having to actually pay for it. And so they are stopped and now they're trafficked. And I think there's a question as to what sort of protection then do we offer these people? And this is a question that has been asked world over, even in research. When a smuggling victim becomes a trafficked victim, what kind of protection are we going to offer them? First of all, do we arrest them and charge them and put them away in the cells as people who are smuggled because they do not have the right papers or they have fake papers?
Thank you.
Or do we actually offer them protection, offer them jobs, which according to our law currently is? So this is something that we need to quite deliberate on.
All right, let's hear from the Principal Secretary of the Ministry of Labour, Susan Muchache, to tell us what some of the providential or some of the remedial measures you've taken in terms of protection when it comes to trafficking, human trafficking. Especially in Kenya, we understand that when we have, let's say, casual laborers going to some of these Middle East countries where they're mistreated, some of them are killed. What are some of the remedial measures that you've come up with from your department?
I think as a ministry, we have tried to address the issue of trafficking. One, from the issue of, because trafficking was happening through adoptions of children. You're aware that a moratorium was placed by the cabinet, stopping any adoption of children to foreigners. And so these children can really not be taken out of the country. And that was done in response to the fact that there was a feeling that we were losing some children through adoption, really, which is another form of trafficking, because yes, adoption is okay and it's a legal process, but it was being taken advantage of by people who wanted to traffic our children. So we put a moratorium. We are currently reviewing our laws to see if they're adequate enough and have no loopholes really that would allow for trafficking to happen through adoption. So that process is ongoing. Then, of course, when you talk about the issue of labor under the State Department of Labor, the foreign recruitment agencies, those again were, previously another conduit of us having some of our citizens being trafficked to particularly the Middle Eastern countries. But you're aware that that was also put on hold. We withdrew all licenses some while ago, and we have revetted all the agencies and are vetting every new agent that is coming on board. And really, in that process of vetting, which also includes really looking at the conduct of their businesses, we found that there are some whose dealings were questionable. And so, of course, they were not given the licenses. And the general threshold around, these recruitment firms has also been stepped up. For example, now they're required to provide bid bonds so that that money can be used in the event that a Kenyan goes out and has a problem and we have to bring them back. We are having to, for example, make sure that they have got physical location, because we had briefcase foreign recruiters. So the efforts by the ministry together with other relevant agencies, including immigrations, the AG's office, the police, the CID, all these agencies working together to vet these institutions has gone a long way to streamline the business of foreign labor recruitment agencies. And we can say that to a very good extent, we have been able to curb or prevent the trafficking of humans through foreign employment. But we also must say that, the other thing that we are looking at now is to build the capacity of the workers themselves that we are sending out, so that they also have some cultural understanding of where they are going and also have some understanding of their basic minimum rights. For example, they must have a contract before they leave the country. And we are also keeping our own database to know where each and every of these Kenyans who is going to work abroad is going. Right. So that is the kind of work that we are currently pursuing. And in addition to that, we are now getting into bilateral agreements with some of the governments where we have most of our particularly domestic workers going. We just signed a bilateral with the government of Qatar and Saudi, etc. Right. Again, with an effort to elevate the issue to our governmental level so that we can jointly work together to stem out any issues of human trafficking.
Fantastic. Let me hear from Aggrey. Aggrey, first of all, I think 2 days ago, there is a new report that came out about child abuse, and I think Nairobi is leading in this. And I don't know if it's Kisumu or which is the other particular county that is leading in child abuse on this. Given that we have this as a capital city and we expect people to be all the wiser when it comes to children and abuse of children as well, why are we leading?
Yeah. First of all, I'd love to say that major cities like Nairobi, Mombasa, and Kisumu, if you look, I think yesterday there's another research by World Bank that said that about 60% of Nairobians are actually slum dwellers. This means that a number of people, so many people, are very poor and they can easily be targeted, but those who want to traffic them. So most of the people, you'll find them that be targeted for trafficking.
Yes.
But again, at the same time, other people from the rural communities, like Jacinta had alluded to earlier. Most of the time, Kenya, we also have domestic trafficking taking place. So when this takes place, people usually get lured from the rural villages to Nairobi. So Nairobi becomes like the fulcrum. And then the same time when you look at international human trafficking, especially those ones who come from the corridors of Ethiopia through Moyale, they come through Nairobi. So Nairobi is not only a source from the slum communities, it is also a transit point, but also at the same time a destination point for trafficking.
All right, so Nairobi is leading. Which other city is leading as well?
I know Kisumu and also Mombasa.
All right. So in light of all that we know, especially with the child abuse, maybe we've not really drilled deeper into the report, but we can see our schools where we expect that we have our teachers that we trust. They've been leading in child abuse, especially when we're talking about, sexual exploitation or, underage children being embroiled in sex. And of course, we've had this report about underage pregnancies and that being perpetrated by school teachers. What have you been doing as an organization? Maybe also in liaison with the particular ministry. I don't know if they should be involved in this particular, or it's their domain, or it's youth and gender as well.
Yeah, I'd like to say that ANCAN is a regional office. We have chapters across the continent, 26 of them.
Yes.
And in Kenya, we usually target our projects and we work very closely. If you look at our mission, it states that we work in partnership with others. So we've been partnering very closely with government agencies and also other non-state actors. And one of them is actually the Ministry of Education. We've been targeting a number of schools, trying to train teachers on child rights issues, at the same time supporting them to form child rights clubs. We have child rights clubs, a number of them in several schools, not only in Nairobi, but across the country. And the big key thing here is to empower the children so that they can participate in issues that affect them, which also includes not only referring cases to other agencies, but also advocating for their own rights within the school setup. If you look at previous studies, and I know they can also add more, those people who usually abuse children are people who are known to the children, not only teachers, but also within the household families.
All right. Let's hear from also Jacinta as well. And I said, you can always chime in. You don't have to wait for me to pick up your name or go sequentially. Right? If you feel like you have a valid point to raise, you do so. But there's a question also of the legislation around it, the framework that we have, especially with the Constitution and the legislation we're talking about. So in Kenya, we had the Trafficking Act, I think that was in 2010. And of course, you've tried to make sure this is in tandem with the UN trafficking in person legislation as well. Will you tell us more about this protocol of UN trafficking in person and also our legislation, briefly, Jacinta? What is domiciled there? What are the key highlights?
The key highlights of the ANTOC is basically the ANTOC has various protocols. Of course, one of them is the human trafficking and smuggling. The reason why that protocol was in the ANTOC is for obvious reason that it was seen that human trafficking, being an organized crime, must be fought, and the fact that countries must adhere to bringing the protocol articles into our law. And you can see because of the protocol, our law was actually has been put in place. And as we speak right now, the law is being implemented fully. It is almost automatic that we are actually signatory to the ANTOC. The fact that we were signatory and we ratified that, the ANTOC, definitely, then we have to follow the rules set out in the ANTOC. The fact that Kenya is implementing shows that we have come a long way in ensuring that human trafficking is being fought. So basically, I can say Kenya, being part of the world, has done its part and done it very, very well.
Lisa, you as a country, as also, what sort of signatories are you also signed up to? Are you privy to this particular signatoral?
Well, what I can tell you is that in the United States, and I think Jacinta brought up a very interesting point, that we're talking about human trafficking, and I want to commend you for taking the time to talk about it on the show, because we have so much to do in terms of raising public awareness.
Yes.
But what's interesting to me is this has obviously been going on for a very long time. But even in the United States, it wasn't until the year 2000 that we actually had a national law against human trafficking. And so all of the countries of the world, to the extent that they are now very focused on this terrible international crime, we really haven't been watching it until maybe 20, 15, 10, 5 years ago. And so there is a lot of work to do, not just within government, but also to raise public awareness. And this is something that we talked about a lot yesterday, in part because what we have learned in the United States is that with our national hotline, where people can call to report, 75% of the people who are rescued because it was a member of the public who reported. It's not law enforcement, not government that's determining this is happening, but it's members of the public. And so it's very important that the general public know, but there are also certain business sectors that need to know in particular. So we make sure in Illinois to pass a law recently requiring the posting of notification about the hotline number, about what your rights are, so that if you are working against your will, either as part of sex trafficking or labor trafficking, in a bar, in a hotel or a motel, that information is available to you so you can call to report, hopefully to make sure you are taken out of that situation. But again, much work needs to be done, because whether it's the United States or Kenya, we are all finally starting to do this work with the public as well, not just government.
All right, and of course, this forum, we want all of us to really chime in. Florence,
I
can
just
see
want
you.
to add something about the laws in Kenya. If you look at the Constitution of Kenya, it provides against practice of slavery. I mean, be it children, be it adults. And then we have the Children Act also, which has a lot of emphasis on the interest of the child. So what we can say is that in Kenya, we have the laws that protect children, and of course also trafficking in human. But now we have a problem of implementation, because we don't have the capacity on the government agencies. We have, little resources that should go into implementing the prevention of human trafficking.
Yes.
So we may have to think about how do we implement the laws other than just having the laws in place. Yes.
All right, thank you.
Well, speaking, if you allow me, speaking a bit about implementation, and if you look at our law currently, the Trafficking in Persons Act, the one thing, and I think it's very important for Kenyans to understand this, is that anyone who's found guilty of trafficking is looking at 30 years or 30 million.
Yes.
30 million in fines, and so that is the first thing. But then talking about implementation is, in the Act, there is two bodies that are formed to enable the implementation of this law. So there is an advisory committee, which is the one that I chair, and then there is the National Assistance Trust Fund for Victims of Trafficking. And I think as a country, it's important that we start moving from, we have, this multi-sectoral, multi-agency, the advisory committee, which advises the PS and the cabinet secretary on these issues. And we're looking at, the gaps. And as an advisory committee, we actually came up with a national plan of action. Now, if you look at our national plan of action, we costed it, and the most monies are going into protection, because as a country, we haven't been doing much in terms of preventing human trafficking. So we have a high number of trafficked victims, and we are not doing much in terms of protection and in terms of protecting them. So what we are hoping is this, that if we start looking at how to tackle trafficking from protection, prosecution, and prevention, I think we'll be able to move faster and move forward, and maybe hopefully move to Tier 1. I would love Lisa to explain to us why the US is on Tier 1 and we are not. And the numbers are almost the same, right?
Yes.
So And I think that's my point is that we need to start looking at implementation of this law or combating human trafficking as prevention, protection, and prosecution. So currently, and maybe the PS can speak a bit more about it, what you're looking in terms of the provisions about protection for the victims, and then maybe we can jump into what else we can do about prevention.
And that's why I wanted also to drill deeper with you, PS, because first of all, we had this. I know you're privy to the Sudan 4, right? And we've been talking about free the Sudan 4, the Kenyan, the Kenyans who were actually held up in Sudan, and they had a sentencing for life. I think it was 75 years. But now we've seen the Court of Appeal has come through and they've quashed that particular sentencing, and they've requested for and ordered for a fresh trial as well. But it seems from the Kenyan government, you've been slow on the uptake on trying to push this particular case, and people were wondering, their families for almost 3 years, they've been agitating and they've been pushing the envelope for their relatives to be released from the government. But we've never had any statement coming from you, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I don't know if this is not really within your remit as well, but you can mention it because you talked about an agreement between Kenya and other countries as well when it comes to labor, the preventions of our citizens as well. But how comes they've been locked up there for all those good years and none or no remedial measure has come from the government so far, or even just to tell the family of the progress, because they had to come to media. I remember I hosted some of them here and they were crying that there's nothing. They've even held night vigils, in various parts of the city to try and talk about this.
I think on that issue, yes, you're very right. It is not an issue that is, domiciled within the ministry, but I think I can give a comment and say that every effort is being put to deal with that case of the 4 Sudanese. And I think yesterday...
The 4 Kenyans in Sudan.
The 4 Kenyans in Sudan. And I think yesterday the AG alluded to it. Every diplomatic effort, every political effort is being used to make sure that we get those individuals' issue resolved. Yes. So the idea of saying that nothing is happening is completely misplaced. It is not correct. Every effort is being put in, and we hope that we shall have a good outcome, because we must also respect the legal processes within other jurisdictions. We have some of our own Kenyans who face charges in other countries. So it's a delicate matter, and I would just say that we are using every front we can, besides the legal process that is currently going on there, the diplomatic channels, the political angle, to try and address the issue. And so I would like to give that assurance that it's not a matter that has been ignored. It's actually being addressed.
And of course, I can't really push you on this because this is not really within your topic. But of course, you come from the government as well. Yeah. So the government is a government, regardless of what department you're coming through. Yes. But still, the family has been here. They've said truly, they don't really hold with your view that nothing is, as you say, that our statement is misplaced, that you're doing nothing, because they say the government has been doing nothing.
I think
until now, this particular court of appeal actually quashed the sentencing.
I think we don't have to be up and talking about this everywhere, so that
but at least it should be some assurance for the family, don't you think so?
It should be an assurance to the family, and I think if they have, and I'm sure they have perhaps had other statements by other officers in government, and particularly the ones who are closely related. The fact is that the issue is under discussion, and even from cases from other countries, including even where the citizens of the US are involved. Sometimes negotiations go on for a very long time before they can get back their citizens into their country. So these are not issues that can be addressed overnight. They are long-drawn processes, and to give that assurance that for a fact it's an issue that the government is working on.
All right.
I think there's also something related to that. Maybe it could be even a matter of national importance. Mm-hmm. There was a time that we sat in a task force, Jacinda may tell us, that was thinking about a law on transfer of prisoners, because the concern of the family is that these are their relatives who are serving in foreign jails. So that if we have any Kenyans who are serving in other foreign jails, there's an arrangement with those particular countries so that you respect their laws, and then you have your citizens come to serve whatever term they've been put on in your country, in their country. Then their relatives can easily visit them. I don't know how far that has gone.
Maybe experientially we can learn, because we have a foreigner, Lisa, here,
I was afraid you would say that. Because, you know, I think it's being pointed out. I mean, there are certainly circumstances where American citizens are in another country and they break the law, and there's very little. And the U.S. State Department will tell you before you travel to a foreign country, if you break the law, you know, you are going to be held responsible, and there's very little that the United States can do. Obviously, they can, you know, try to work diplomatically to make sure that you are not mistreated wherever you're being held. But, you know, if you're in a foreign country and you break the law, oftentimes there's very little another country can do, particularly if you don't have good diplomatic relations with them.
So the diplomatic protocol has to take precedence, and that can also be very slow as well.
Well, the law takes precedence, right, wherever you are. And so it's the, you know, the diplomats come in, oftentimes will try to sort things out, but that does not override the law.
Okay.
And just to maybe put a link this to human trafficking.
Yes.
Just again, I think a month or two ago, there was a case that was reported about, I think, 30 girls that were arrested in Saudi. And one of the questions and the interesting discussions that we had as an advisory committee, Jacinta actually sits in the advisory committee as well. And one of the things that we were looking at is, so they're arrested for prostitution, but how did they actually get to these countries? You see, that is where human trafficking actually comes in. It is in the transportation, it is in the fraudulent dealings, it's in the lies that they are told when they're traveling. And one of the things that I sought to ask, and I haven't got an answer yet, is if we were able to actually identify that these girls who had gone to Saudi for, you know, to work, did they all you know, use the right channels? Were they promised a better life and then they got there and found a different life? Were they prostitutes found, because I was told that they were found in a house, in sort of a brothel. But so who put them there? You know, that's the question that we should be asking. And what is it that our Kenyan government can actually do to make sure that we at least give, you know, some sort of help and assistance to this to our victims? Because, you know, there is an assumption that, you know, that these girls go out there and because, you know, working hard, working in a house is pretty hard, so they decide to become prostitutes. But that in itself is a very huge assumption to actually make, you know, basing it on, you know, on a false premise. So I think that is something that we need to start looking at. What kind of help can we give when our, you know, labor employees, you know, when they go out there? That is a difficult question that I think the government should start looking at.
So Ruth brings up a perfect point, right? Which is the fact that, you know, oftentimes people think, and she talked about it in detail earlier, right? Young people are told, you're going to get an education, you're going to get a job, and families end up spending an enormous amount of money to send their children somewhere, or even their young adult children somewhere, with the promise of a better life. And in fact, what they find out, and it's even true in the story you played earlier about the people ending up in Libya and how they're being tortured in that process, they find out that in fact, no, there is no education at all. There is no job. You are now basically a sex slave. And when that happens, and you then get arrested for breaking a law in another country, well, that's trafficking, right? And so there's the overriding laws that we have to look at internationally to make sure that those traffickers are held accountable, and that those girls or those women or those boys, because this happens to boys as well, are actually taken out of that situation, returned home.
Right.
Yeah, I want to say that initially Ruth alluded to the Ps that are there within the National Action Plan for countering human trafficking in Kenya. A number of strides have been made, and that is why we actually got promoted from Tier 2 watch list to Tier 2. But again, like we've already agreed, we have a number of issues that we need to address. If you look at the 5 Ps, in terms of prevention, of course, awareness is there, but again, at the same time, we've also been addressing some of the push factors that push these people into trafficking, not only internationally, but also domestically. So some of them are actually poverty, awareness raising, working with children, like you've asked me, in the schools, but at the same time, also trying to address, making sure that children are in school. If you look at the Kenyan statistics, there's no transition. If you look at those who finish class 8 and those who transit to Form 1, there are a number of children thousands of children who don't transit, and these are some of the children that are actually being targeted for trafficking. Then when you look at in terms of prosecution, we have a number of challenges also there. We have very good laws. We have the National Action Plan, and I'm glad that yesterday it was reported that for the first time ever, the government is going to support the advisory committee in terms of addressing this kind of issues, and now they have some budgetary allocation. But again, when you look at in terms of the law, we have the best law. We have the law there. But in terms of are the prosecutors, are the police officers, what the people who are supposed to be arresting perpetrators of trafficking aware of these laws? One of the things that is coming out from the experiences, especially that ANCAN has had, is that we've been training these policemen in terms of being aware about the existence of the law.
Yes.
But again, there is need now of looking at a macro level in terms of training them at Kiganjo, for example.
Thank you. All right. Before we come to you, Jacinta, we have also a caller hanging on the line. We'll just take one call this morning because we're really strapped for time. We have Simon from Bungoma. You have a question or a contribution for us. Good morning, Simon.
Good morning, Debao.
Very well. Thank you very much, and thank you for calling in. Please be very brief.
I want to comment on slavery.
Yes, very briefly, sir.
Slavery has been a time immemorial kind of activity.
Yes.
And I feel that we may not eradicate slavery. It's only that people have to treat slaves or anyone who works under them in a fair manner, because you may not eradicate that. Because I even find that women, ladies, have a high affinity for help, like house help and all around. Let's just have laws for fair treatment of those who work under us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. Do they really have a high affinity, or they actually pushed, or that's the only option that we do have? Let's hear what you have to say also on Twitter. We can see a rush of tweets also coming through on our Twitter handle, AMLiveNTV. Remember to use the hashtag AMLiveNTV. And Husha is going to come in with that on the other side.
Right, so 20 minutes to 8. Your tweets have been coming in from 6. We have a lot of tweets today. Remember, if you still haven't gotten your tweet yet, AMLiveNTV is our home, as Dibal mentioned. That's on Twitter and that's on Facebook. Use the hashtag AMLiveNTV. So from Facebook, we have our question was, should suspects of human trafficking be granted bail? And we had, I seem to have lost it. Give me, all right, here we are. It really does not matter whether you give bail or not. They normally bribe their way out. So let us discuss who should get the bribe, how much it should be, how it should be paid, and if it should be divided or the chief should eat it alone. Very, very sad attitude. Unfortunately, from the tweets that I have been getting, it seems a lot of people feel like this is a hopeless situation, and the people in power are not giving enough attention to this. We also have Emirates, who says the constitution is express on granting of bail. It is not a question of discretion on the specific case of whether to grant it or not. We have Ravi, who says it is a controversial thing again. So that's it for Facebook. And then on Twitter, we have at Kinango, who says bail is anchored in the constitution. It's a right, not discretionary. We also have John Gidanga, who said people were made to be loved, things to be used. The world is in chaos because things are being loved and people are being used. That's a sad state of affairs, but it is unfortunately true. Child trafficking, this is at Marketer Manuela, who says child trafficking is mainly undertaken for sexual exploitation, forced labor, radicalization, begging, and crime. So that's all that we had for the feedback. Remember, you should keep your feedback coming. This conversation goes on in social media on AM Live and TV. So last week we were talking about a different issue. Last week on this day, it was about the Peace Project and what the different groups in private sector, their roles they have to play. And the church came up because it's hard finding the balance, because the church is being told not to take sides, but at the same time they're being told not to just be silent while perhaps there's chances of violence going on or disunity among Kenyans. So finding the balance, that was the tricky thing, but listen to this.
The position of the church will not take sides in a political environment. But what I want to say is that the church can't afford to sit at the periphery with the rest of society when engagements of, say, looking for leadership is concerned. But it's not the responsibility of the church to point out and say this leader is more better than the other one. the responsibility of the church is to educate the masses on the quality of leadership that we should be looking for.
Indeed, it is not the church's responsibility to choose your leader for you. It is not anybody's responsibility by yourself, so choose wisely because you are stuck with your leader for 5 years. Tipa.
Right. Many thanks indeed, Usha there. And I think Kipleting, he also raises a very important point that I think also we will have missed out on this, because the issue of radicalization is big. We had also from the government that they've enrolled or rolled out a program on de-radicalization, and we've heard little about it or what is happening in Mashinani. So, of course, we have the PS Principal Secretary telling us, of course, some of these things that they do, they don't really have to come to the fore on media to tell us blow by blow or give us an account, a blow-by-blow account of what they're doing. But we want to know also, how is the issue of radicalization so big? Thank you, Usha. And of course, I'll post that to our panelists who are already here this morning. And thank you for your tweets, the rush of tweets also, and your call, Simon. Thank you very much for your questions as well. Right, can we continue with this conversation? I don't know where we left at, but we've heard also from Simon, and also we've heard also from Kipleting and other viewers chiming in as well. But before we did that, you had something to say.
Yes, that is true. The PS actually said there are so many things which have been done to ensure that people don't go out there without being sensitized about what they're going to meet out there.
Yeah.
But the problem is not those people who come through the Ministry of Labor. The problem is the victims who go there behind the Ministry of Labor's approval.
Yes.
They go there and those are the people who are actually abused mostly. So I'm thinking that one thing that needs to be done, and in a very big way, is sensitization of the public, serious public awareness. People don't even know that they're supposed to go through the Ministry of Labor, or even, they don't know where to go in the first place. So a lot needs to be done to sensitize the public at large so that they are not vulnerable. I thought somebody else brought out the issue of prosecution, not, well, we do prosecute these cases, but the challenge is that, this was highlighted yesterday during the meeting, you find that some of these witnesses who we intend to have as witnesses in our case have either been deported back to their countries. So you'll have a situation where you have a case, on the paper you have some, statements, which look like they're very, very good. But when you go to court, you find the witnesses have already been deported. But all is not lost. The fact that we can come up with immigration, with all these other actors, means that we are able to, to get these victims and keep them. And so that they can be able to, they can also be protected if they feel that their lives are in danger. But that notwithstanding, the fact is that the DPP's office, now we are over 700 prosecutors, professional prosecutors, is very, very clear that we are out there to prosecute cases professionally. And the only way we can do it is if we all work together. One agency cannot do it all alone. And that is why we are appealing not only even to the government agencies, but also to the civil society.
I think, really, I would want to add my voice on the issue of, the fact that some Kenyans live outside of our knowledge. And I think this is a big problem. The issue of human trafficking is a very complicated problem because you also have almost voluntary individuals who participate. You know very well that you're going through illegal means and you offer yourself to go. And I do agree with you that a lot of sensitization needs to be done so that our people are more aware. And that is the work that the Counter-Trafficking Advisory Committee has. And we have now given them an allocation of resources because they had a challenge. We didn't have resources for them. But we are giving them resources. And one of the priorities that we hope they will pick up is the issue of sensitization and awareness. That is very fundamental. May I also add, looking at the tweets that came in, the feeling that nothing much is being done. I think from the discussions we have had here, we have come a long way and a lot is being done. And this is not an effort that is being driven by one agency of government. If you talk about the State Department, say, of the children, social protection, we have placed a moratorium on adoption so that we can sit back, look at our laws, look at the processes of adoption to ensure that child trafficking does not happen through that process. If you look at the labor issue, foreign employment, we also put a moratorium. We have put procedures in place. We have put guidelines in place. We have streamlined the business of foreign affairs, foreign recruitment. If you look at the Department of Immigration, the amount of work going on to protect our borders, and you have mentioned about radicalization. Of course, besides just human trafficking for the purposes of labor and sex, I don't know how we would classify the whole issue of people just being trafficked for purposes of radicalization, because some of them are misled. You live here imagining you're going for something else, only to find that you have entered a gang of criminals. And so every effort is being made, and if you look at what's happening at immigration, for example, our passports, we are going to be having a different kind of passport which will not allow for the impersonation of people. And that is an effort to stem out this whole business of human trafficking, to ensure that we know who is getting in and out of our borders. And we are generally strengthening. And a lot of work is also going in terms of building the capacity of our enforcement agencies at the borders, again led by the counter-trafficking committee, which as a ministry we are a secretariat. And the whole point is to build their capacity to be able to detect cases of trafficking. Even our own children officers, for example, are being trained to be able to detect, especially at the borders, because sometimes you can actually tell when a child is being trafficked. If you're trained to do that, you'll be able to tell when a grown-up is being trafficked. And every effort is being taken. Right now, as we speak, a number of officers, either in immigration or police stationed at our borders, have been trained under that program under the counter-trafficking secretariat.
Right, and I think we as we're closing, we've got only 5 minutes to go, and of course you'll be giving your headline thoughts. And that particular issue of radicalization should be tackled as well. And I don't know how, since you had this particular conference, and you have legislation, this 2010 Trafficking Act that we had, the Trafficking of Human Trafficking and Persons Act 2010. I don't know how the legislation can be reconfigured right now to accommodate, because there's a bit also of confusion. If we have children who are, being taken from the country solely for the purpose of radicalization, maybe in Somalia or elsewhere, and then they come back and then they're this Al-Shabaab sympathizers as well. The issue of radicalization, how are we reconfiguring the legislation to accommodate this? And lastly, yes.
Sorry, if we can talk about radicalization, what you need to realize is that human trafficking is related to other internationally organized crimes. So for purposes of radicalization, you find them in terrorism, which is an internationally organized crime. You'll also find them doing gun trotting, which is trafficking in arms. You'll also find them doing drug trafficking, like carriers, the young children, and even adults. And that is another internationally organized crime. So human trafficking is not just on its own. And that's what we discussed yesterday. There are many other crimes on the international level.
But since this is a global, transnational threat, and it's taking another premium altogether, a notch higher on all the, don't you think it's always, or it is prudent that we maybe just come with a particular act on this, because this is an existential threat that is growing in the country as well. We've had very young girls, straight A girls, you can see, and they know full well. They're not duped with the lure of jobs or anything. They know they're going to be jihadist brides. And they go solely maybe to Syria or elsewhere to become brides. And they're raped and they're killed. We have an issue
on that, please, and say that today we are not talking about terrorism and all this. That may not be our
But
area.
it's tucked away, yes.
But yes, and it is related, yes, to trafficking. But on the other hand, the one thing that is a fact, our laws are very adequate. We have got some of the best laws in the region, and even among the best in the world. So the issue here is not about whether we have the right legislation or not. We do have the legislation in place. In fact, when you're looking at the issue of human trafficking, sometimes it is an issue of which law that makes, is the issue of, do our officers know which laws to make reference to? Because there are about 3 or 4 different types of legislation that you can look at. If you're looking at an issue to do with a child, the Children's Act is there, the Counter-Trafficking Act is there. We have an act on the, on crimes as well. So you have an act on to do with the immigration. So when you look at the flurry of legislations that exist, in fact, the issue is to build the capacity of the officers dealing with trafficking to be able to relate to each piece of legislation that is relevant. In fact, sometimes the risk that we run is that when cases of human trafficking are being dealt with, the people concerned do not know or do not have the knowledge or the insight of the very relevant legislation that can help to prosecute that case. So that is actually what the problem is, rather than the issue that we don't have legislation. Legislations are very, very adequate.
Right, we're strapped for time. I want to hear from Lisa as well as we're ending up, and then we'll come to also very briefly Aggrey as well. But Lisa, let's talk about the executive orders and also the immigration that we know people were really, really frustrated with it, ruffle a lot of feathers around the world. But how has this also, in a way, compromised, some of the protocols that you are signatory to, like maybe the UN Trafficking in Person Protocol?
So I think the difficulties are many when it comes to the executive orders that the federal administration in the United States has come down with over the last several weeks and months. So much so, particularly in terms of what we refer to as the travel ban, that myself and a larger group of Democratic attorneys general have successfully countered them in our court system. And so now, even though they said this is what they wanted to do, yes, they are not in effect. But I think one of the concerns is it sends the wrong message. I always look at the United States, and the promise of the United States is one where we are a country of immigrants. We are a country of people from all over the world who have come together very successfully in terms of moving people forward and the opportunities that they can have. And so I don't want to see that change. I think that is the reason that you see so many people coming to our country, but that should also be our strength. So there are a lot of very difficult changes taking place in the United States right now, and I appreciate having the opportunity to be with you and talk about some of them.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Aggrey, briefly as we're winding up, I think the other issue that we don't really, and we've not really talked, and maybe also was missed in your conference yesterday, I don't know where we can actually put the other able children who are being abused. Some of them, they could be deranged, or maybe they have mental disability, and you find them, they're locked like cows. They're actually on a leash, in the backyards at home, because people they don't want, or the stigma around it, they don't want to be identified with that particular child. I don't know what, as an organization, you've been doing to help these children. Is it part of child abuse, or how do you categorize that? We have the tourists who come into this country as well. Mombasa is known for, sexual violations and, pedophiles as well. Very briefly.
Yeah, it's both abuse and neglect also on the part of the parents sometimes. At ANCAN, we've had specifically also a project targeting deaf children, because it's another category of some people with disabilities that make them to be stigmatized in the community. What we've been doing is to work very closely with the parents. One is to improve on their parenting skills. Two is to also make them aware of the rights of the children that they have, and also the opportunities that are there. Sometimes people are poor, and because of that, they cannot be in a position to access some resources. But again, resources are there at the community level. It could be at the constituency, CDF, it could be civil society like us. So one of the things that we've been focusing on is to capacity building, to make sure that other children within the community can be able to advocate for the rights of children like those ones, at the same time also to make the communities to be aware of the regulations that are there.
Right, thank you.
I think if I may add,
very briefly,
one area that we have really tried to address, and one, of course, we need to raise awareness, but the second thing, some of the government programs to assist families with persons with disability has really helped people come out. Because one, for a family, because we have the cash transfers targeting families that have children or persons that have got severe disability. That in itself, because families realize that they can receive some support, has made them come out and own their persons who are living with disabilities. We are also giving assistive devices for persons who are living with disability. That too is making people come out, because they have to register. And in that course of registration, they're receiving some awareness about the issue, and they are taking, owning or accepting these persons that are living with disabilities. So I think the fact that we are providing support for families with persons with disabilities is helping a lot to destigmatize the issue of living with disabilities.
Thank you very much. We're strapped for time, and I want to thank you very much, Susan Mochache, Principal Secretary, State of Department of Social Protection, Ministry of Labor. Thank you for coming through. Also, Jacinta Nyamosi, Senior Assistant Director of Public Prosecutions Department. Thank you for coming through. I want to thank you, Aggrey Willis Otieno, Program Coordinator. NPPCAN Regional Office, thank you for coming through. That is the African Network for the Prevention and Protection Against Child Abuse and Neglect. Also, we want to thank you, Ruth Juliet Gashanja, Advocate Advisory Committee on Counter-Trafficking in Person. You are the chairperson. Thank you very much. And Lisa Madigan, Attorney General, Illinois. Thank you for coming through and, of course, talking to us about that ticklish issue about the Mayday, United Airlines. And Florence as well, Mwangangi, she's an advocate of the High Court and a former Judicial Service Commission member. Thank you for coming through. We really do appreciate it. And of course, just like yesterday, you don't have enough time here on AM Live as well. But we want to thank you for coming through. Thank you for the salutary. Thank you.
Very much.
So there's breakfast, sumptuous breakfast waiting for you. So I'll just take you downstairs. We have a breakfast. Thank you.
Isn't that amazing how quickly the time goes? There's never enough of it on TV.
Okay.
I think it's going to be an hour.
Yes.
Boom,
Sure.
gone.
Not for carry-ons. We leave them here.
Yeah.
They say yes. We leave them here. Yes, we will.